You are now listening to Diamond in the Desert podcast, hosted by content creator Roshocker and former Dbacks pitcher Trevor McKenna.
Welcome back, everyone, to Diamond in the Desert, episode 8. We are your hosts, Roshocker, with former Diamondbacks pitcher Trevor McKenna. How are we feeling for this episode?
Feeling good, man. We got some good topics on deck. A story about the Arizona Diamondbacks closer, and the ultimate question: how hard is it to make the major leagues? We're going to answer it today. I'm excited.
Ooh, I am definitely intrigued. And remember, this podcast is on the Believe Network, and you can find this on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you can listen to podcasts on. We are 10 days away from opening day, and there is nobody on the Diamondbacks that wears number 10, so we don't have a shout out to anyone, but we're 10 days away. Do you feel the excitement getting closer and closer?
I'm so pumped, man. And this month is just flying by, right? And I know all the guys that are in spring training right now are just biting at the bit. They are ready to go, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go watch them. Let's do it.
Yo, I'm ready as well. There's been some great performances, and even this past week, we've seen some awesome stuff that we will get into later. But we have our D-back spotlight, and we got a cool story that you had hinted to about someone's journey into the major leagues. Now, a lot of times as fans, we think, oh, you get drafted, from playing the show, you go through the minor league steps to finally get that phone call that says, congratulations, you have been invited to spring training. And as good as it sounds, the journey isn't that easy. There's a long road. There's so many different players that are out there competing to get that spot. I mean, if you really think about it, from the high school level, there's tons of high schools all over the country. There's tons of colleges all over the country. And so it could be a really challenging thing to try and make it to the majors. And you got a cool story about one guy's journey, and I cannot wait to hear it.
Yeah, man. Paul Sewald. Looked up his story last week and was just super intrigued. It really resonated with me. It was a lot like my story. But first of all, he comes from a big baseball family, right? So dad was an former college baseball pitcher, was drafted out of high school, actually. He was picked by the Red Sox. He declined to go on to play college. And then his younger brother actually got drafted in the 14th round in 2015 by the Houston Astros. And he would go on to play with the Astros from 2015 to 2017 and then moved on from baseball. But definitely a really solid baseball family. And I could tell Sewald was ready to go. He wanted to get in baseball probably as a young kid, right? But going into high school and college ball, he was actually a starter in high school, just like me. we somehow became a closer, right? In high school, he was solid, man. Senior year, put up a 7-0 record and a 1.57 ERA, really, really dominant. But even with those stats, was undrafted. So ended up deciding to go to the University of San Diego and actually played all 4 years there. Did really well. Senior year there, 8-4 record with a 3.09 ERA as a starter. So really did solid in high school and college. And then kind of got into the draft as well. So he got picked up by the New York Mets in 2012 in the 10th round. So I want to make sure everybody hears this clearly. 10th round, okay, got $1,000 signing bonus.
That's it? $1,000?
$1,000, guys, and a lot of people call it $1,000 and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a plane ticket. Let's get there. So that shows you guys what type of money there is out there for senior signs. Not everybody gets the millions and millions of dollars. Some guys are signing on at a low signing bonus to just get that shot, right?
Wow.
Crazy.
And that's really just crazy because you look at other sports and, you hear the big signing bonuses, and like you said, it's in the millions. In the NFL, millions. Even if you get drafted in round 7, I think you still get at least 50,000 or more. And to, sit here, hey, I got drafted in the 10th round. The 10th round, that's still pretty good. And your signing bonus is $1,000, which he can probably spend that really fast.
Oh yeah, and then after taxes, you're probably looking at 600 anyway, so it's not
True.
it's not that big of a deal, right? But it's crazy, and then he goes into professional baseball and makes a name for himself. Now, I want you guys to remember that date of 2012. Just keep that in the back of your mind through this podcast. But those first 2 years does really solid. Most impressively, in the 2013 season, so that second year, so the second year in professional baseball, he's with the Savannah Sand Gnats. Put up a 3-2 record with a 1.77 ERA. So yeah, they actually made him a reliever right out of the gate. They saw that reliever ability, and then did great. So then would spend another 4 years after that in the minors, right? So on top of those 2 years, another 4 years. He did not get called up to the MLB with the New York Mets until April 8th, 2017. Wow. 5 years.
That is wild. And, we're looking at his stats in between, and it's somebody who you would think a team will want him on their squad like immediately. And it took that long just to make the majors.
Took him that long, man. It's that much of a process to go through. Short season A ball when you first get on, and then you have long season A ball, then you have AA and AAA, and then you're just knocking at the door, you're waiting, right? And it's usually 1 year each level. Sometimes it could even be 2 years if you have a little bit more development, but it's a long process. And Roshocker, I was telling you before, Adley Rutschman, right? The starting catcher for the Orioles, spent 3 years in the minors, even though he was drafted first overall. Like, it's a whole long process. It's crazy.
That is wild. And, for those that end up making it to the majors, hats off to you, to grind it out, especially you hear those stories of players not, stepping foot until their late 20s, early 30s. And they've been grinding their whole lives just to make that moment.
Definitely, man. Definitely. And it's crazy because then he makes his major league debut and he feels like, oh, I made it. I finally put in all the, the work and the time. And he just kind of fell flat, right? So he would have a 13.5 ERA that year that he got called up over only 6 innings of work in the MLB. And the Mets later released him 3 years later in 2020. He just wasn't having very performing seasons, was trying to work with the pitching coach to figure things out, just couldn't really connect with the Mets organization and their coaching staff. So was released and then was picked up by the Seattle Mariners. He would go on and sign on with a minor league contract in January 7, 2021, and then made his major league debut with them on May 13th, 2021. Did a lot better with the Mariners. He really put in the work in the minors to work on his repertoire, figure out, what type of pitcher he really was. And I read an article, he was really working on something called tunneling, where when you throw your fastball, it looks like something to a hitter. And he wanted his breaking ball to come out of that same tunnel, that same hand area where that ball is being released, and have that a different break. But it looks like the fastball out of the hand all the way halfway up to the hitter. So he really started working on that, really getting into high, spin rate, really working on all those things, even looking at a lot of film. That's where he really started performing, right? He started figuring out what type of pitcher am I, right? So did really, really well in 2021, 2022, 5-4 record with a 2.67 ERA as a reliever. So really did solid as the Mariners. And I think the Diamondbacks knew, like, hey, this guy is unbelievable. We have to pick him up, right? And Sewald would later be traded to the Diamondbacks July 31st, 2023. And we know the rest is history. I mean, he dominated. But just to see that path, guys, right? Being drafted in 2012, not making the majors for another 5 years, kind of going through the struggles when you first get up there for the first 3 years of MLB. And then he finally lands it with the Mariners and now the Diamondbacks. And now it's chugging along. Crazy, crazy story.
That is super insane, and it's really cool to see him be successful now. I kind of wonder, and we've talked a lot over the last few episodes about your mentals, and even this past episode, you discussed how you watch film to try and get better, to try and see what can you work on, and a lot of times, depending on a player's background, You don't know if maybe something like playing in a big city like New York. We've seen a lot of players go to New York, whether it be the Yankees, whether it be the Mets.
Mhm.
And, they went from having a great ERA to all of a sudden their ERA is consistently in the fours and fives. And, the media is on you. They're honest with you on the East Coast compared to the West Coast. And that's just a different type of mentals that things that you go through. Does that affect players in your opinion? And what are some other steps that players can try and do if they're playing in a big market compared to playing in a small market?
Yeah, it's a huge pressure, man. I had a few guys in the Mets and the Yankees organization, and even if you're a top prospect, you haven't even made the major league team yet. These newspapers and these guys that write the magazines and do all these articles and even podcasts will rip these guys, man. Like
Yeah.
you have one bad outing and they will just get on you, right? And it's just that type of that feeling of being up there, and you're just going to get dogged, right? If you don't perform, you're going to get dogged on. Some guys really blossom with that. They love that. They love that football mentality. Like, hey, if I do bad, let me know. But other guys are like, hey, man, like I'm going out there and doing my best, right? But I think it really shows to Sewald's character. He could have easily just gave up and hung up the cleats after 2020, right? When he got released from the Mets, he could have easily said, you know what? It's probably just not for me, right? It's time for me to move on. But he said, I think I got something here. I'm going to go back to the drawing board. Let me figure out who I am as a baseball player and a pitcher, and let me see what I can do. Most guys wouldn't be able to mentally handle that, and he probably had some great mental performance coaches. But probably, with how big his baseball family is as well, his dad was probably giving him some pointers as well. Like, look, I understand you're going through it right now, but keep pushing forward. You're going to have your moment. Even my dad, when I first started college baseball, he gave me this great quote. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And that's ultimately what it's all about, guys. If you're going through some hard times, whether it's baseball and real life, just remember, hey, you can make changes and you can control what you can control the controllables, right? Do what you can do every day, and those results will speak for themselves.
I love that. And, as you pointed out, he looked at the film, he worked on his mechanics. He tried to find, different ways to where he can disguise his pitches when he's going up against hitters. And then we talked about it this year where he worked on a new pitch. This was the first year that he's come into spring training knowing that I am the legit closer on the team. And he wasn't just satisfied with that. He said, no, I want to do more. I want to be better. I want to be more effective. And he incorporated a new pitch. And that just shows that he's hungry. He's never satisfied, that he wants more. And, probably playing in the World Series, just like a lot of Diamondbacks players. They weren't just satisfied of being there. They weren't just satisfied to make it. They want more. They want to be the world champions this year. And I can't wait to see more from Paul Sewald. He's been the most consistent this spring.
Absolutely. And he even went into a little bit more full detail in the article I was reading. And he was talking about when he was with the Mariners and facing the Mets again for the first time after being released. And he ultimately just said, I'm not going to go too full into detail, but I will say the Mets gave up on me. And it was really good to, go after them again. Right. And reading through that as a baseball player, that tells me that they made him as a pitcher keep doing what he was doing in the minors because he was doing well, but he wasn't developing. They weren't giving him that flexibility to develop and become a better baseball player. Because once he made that transition to the Mariners, it was like a flip of a switch. He started working on his craft and it just seemed to blossom, right? So not shouting out the Mets at all or anything like that, but sometimes baseball players need a new scene to really figure out who they are.
That is so true. And we've seen that with a lot of different players. New scenery, just being around a different group of guys. Or sometimes, you need that kick in the butt to where, okay, I did not perform the greatest here. What can I do to get better? And we obviously seen it in his career. Now, you have some interesting percentages on how many players actually make the league. Go ahead and share that with all the listeners and viewers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think fans kind of look at, like you said in the beginning, and fans kind of look at baseball and think, oh, it's an easy ride, right? So I wanted to kind of give you guys some real stats, real time about what these guys go through and what the percentage chances are of making not only professional baseball, college baseball, and the MLB one day. So I want to go through this list. 5.6% of high school baseball players go on to play some type of NCAA college baseball. You heard that right. Just over 5% of high school baseball players play college.
That's
Insane.
insane.
Insane. Now, 10.5% of NCAA college baseball players get drafted by an MLB team. So there's 90% that are left in the dust. Only 10%. Crazy. Only 66% of baseball players drafted in the first round go on to play in the major leagues. So 33% of those first rounders just never make it.
First rounders. You're talking first round, only 66%. These guys was good enough to be the top 30 of not just the country but the world getting drafted, and only 66% make it.
And you have to think about that 66%, not like all these guys turned into Adley Rutschman. Like 66% means they maybe played one MLB game, they didn't cut it, and they were scratched, right? So that 66% could be a lot lower in terms of guys that actually made an impact on their MLB team, right? And we're talking about these teams giving out millions and millions of dollars in the first round as kind of like a lottery system. Like, hey, we're kind of betting on you that you're going to be good in a few years,
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And under 7% of baseball players make it to the major leagues when drafted under the 21st round.
Wow.
Under 7%, right? Now, okay, if you haven't been listening this whole time, listen to this one because this is it, guys. This is where it's like, wow, okay? Only 0.5%, so that's lower than 1%, of all high school baseball players will ever be drafted by an MLB team.
Oh my.
That's guys that go on to college, everything. 0.5% of high school baseball players will ever get drafted.
That is crazy. And, not to discourage anybody out there, but you really got to put in the work. And, it's a rare thing.
Yeah. And that's what, if you're 12 or 13 or 14 listening to this podcast, when coaches tell you it's the little things that matter, it's the absolute truth. You're putting in the work when you think nobody's watching. You warm up the proper way when you think scouts aren't watching. You do everything you can to stand out. And hey, let me tell you guys something. Academics is important too, because if a scout and an organization can see that you could put efforts towards something to accomplish a goal, they love that. That's the first thing they're going to ask is, what's your GPA? Every single time.
Now, one last question, because now we're kind of in a different day and age from, when I went to high school back in the early 2000s to now. Social media is just a huge thing. Is there any advice that you would give to a younger athlete about social media? Maybe, making a highlight reel that might help out, or, different things like that. Or, as we see with other athletes who make mistakes, watching what you post on social media.
Yeah, I'll start with that. Watch what you post on social media. I can't tell you guys how important that is, right? And these teams and organizations and scouts, it's not that they're just going to look at what you've been tweeting or posting in the last few years. They will go deep into your Twitter. They'll go deep into your Instagram or Facebook to see what type of individual that they're betting money on. So not only be smart, but if you did do anything in the past, that's fine. Go clean it up, right? That would be my best advice. And on the other end of the spectrum, get yourself out there. The recruiting process for baseball players now starts as early as 13 years old, with kids verbally committing to Division I schools. Get yourself out there. There's a lot of recruiting platforms that could be a lot of help. Get your video out there, and don't be afraid to contact Division I coaches, get your name out there. If you see an MLB scout, don't be afraid to go talk to them. Hey, just make a name for yourself. I found my Diamondback scout. I talked to him for the first time when I was doing the miles per hour gun in the bleachers for my teammate because I started the day before. That's the first time I met him, and it made an impression. It never hurts to try to start a conversation.
That is great advice. And, that goes towards anything that you guys might be interested in, whether it be you want to get into sports broadcasting or whatever, getting your name out there. Again, like Trevor said, having the grades really will help. Getting your degree really will help. But doing the extra stuff of being, communicating, networking, those are some huge things that can get you to the space that you want to go. And make sure to download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to the podcast on. We got some spring training results from the last time we was on our podcast, and we actually got a lot of games that went in the Diamondbacks' favor this week. Starting with Saturday, Dbacks won 5-4 against the Rangers, but we saw some really good performances of players that look like they're going to be in the opening day lineup. And I'm going to start off with Lourdes Gurriel. He went 1-for-2 with an RBI. Ketel Marte, our MVP of the spring, went 2-for-4 with a double and 2 runs. Blaze Alexander continues to make the job hard on manager Tolo. He went 2-for-3 with a home run. Corbin Carroll went 1-for-3 with a triple. And pitching-wise, Ryan Nelson went 3 2/3, gave up 5 hits, only 1 earned run, and had 4 strikeouts. What did you like from the performances on Saturday?
Yeah, 2 highlights for me, man. Blaze is, like you just said, is really making this decision harder for the Diamondbacks. What do they do with this kid? Was not on the major league team last year. Doesn't have any MLB time, but he is showing up to the field, man, every single day and impressing these guys. So very intrigued with what they decide to do with him, and super pumped about Ryan Nelson, almost up to 4 innings. Gave up a few hits, fine, but was able to work out of those troubles. I had a few walks, had some location issues, but again, was able to make the pitch when it mattered. So I was really happy to see that he was able to, but most importantly, get the 4 innings. That's huge because now we're getting close, 10 days away. Now we're getting close to that 5-inning mark, when that season rolls around.
And you're starting to see guys really fine-tune what they're doing on the mound. And, another guy that we'll talk about a little bit later is Zach Gallen. He might have, it looks like, his ERA doesn't look the greatest. He gives us some hits and whatever. But as we get closer, we start seeing that season form, that veteran pitcher on the mound. Sunday, the D-backs had a split squad day. On one game, the D-backs won 5-4 against the Mariners. We had Luis Frias, your guy, 1 2/3, only gave up a hit, 1 walk, but had 3 strikeouts. Slade Ciccone, who we just got word that he is being designated to AAA. He had 2 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned run, and 4 Ks. Jace Peterson looked good, went 2-for-3 in an RBI, and Jake McCarthy went 1-for-3 with 1 run. Now, I'm going to go back to Slade Ciccone. I saw something to where they said that they want him to really get a lot of innings, which they see that happening more so in the minors than putting him in different situations in the majors. Do you think this is a good move for Slade?
Yeah, super good move. You want him to get those pitches in and those innings in. I think if he makes the major league team, they're probably throwing him in the pen, and I don't think they want that for him right now. I think they want him to go back, get his work in, and it's not the year over yet, right? So he might go back to AAA, but there's a good shot that he might be coming back very, very soon. Again, injuries happen, things happen throughout the season that they need those call-ups. So he's right at that, right at that door to come right back.
Exactly. And, that 5th starting spot in a rotation is still a question mark of, who's going to grab it. And when they do take hold of that spot, how well will they do during the season? So kind of waiting to see if Slade can go down there in the minors and just tear it up. We will definitely see him back in the majors. The second game on Sunday, the Diamondbacks played the Angels, and this is the big one. Zach Gallen, 4 1/3, 1 hit, 0 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. How did you like that performance?
It's super promising, man. You think about 10 days, got probably 2 more outings, right, before he starts the season. To already be close to 5 innings pitched and to be that dominant really shows what we talked about in previous podcasts about guys not too worried about what they're doing early on. They're just trying to work on different pitches, but now he's dialing in. He is being the Zach Gallen that we know, right? So now he's really performing, hitting his spots and throwing what he usually throws in games. And we're seeing that now. Hitters are being fooled and they have no clue what's coming.
Exactly. Ketel Marte, again, 1 for 3 with a double and a run. His 6th double of the spring. And I'm sorry, he even had an RBI. He has 7 RBIs in spring as well. Just tearing it up. Corbin Carroll went 2 for 3 with the run. And Alex Thomas went 2 for 2 with the triple. So I'm really excited just to see these lineups put together. And 10 days away, I cannot wait to get there. Like, we're talking about all these different performances, and let it start already. Diamondbacks, Rockies, opening day. I cannot wait.
So pumped, man. So pumped. And the team looks ready, and they're on all cylinders. And I'm excited to see what they do, man.
Love to see it. We do have a letter in our Dbacks mailbag, and this is from Clyde from Oregon. Ask, in your opinion, does Blaze Alexander make the opening day roster? What do you think, Trevor?
And it's funny, man, because I feel like we've been talking about this for the past few podcasts because he just keeps dominating, right? I think they really have no choice. I think they have to start him on the team, and he's a utility guy. He could really play so many different positions. He's like a Swiss Army knife for the Diamondbacks right now, right? So I think with that, I think he could be a utility guy that's gonna, they're gonna give him his shine, here and there. But I think they just have to, man. Like, he's already proving what he's got. There's no reason for him to be sent back to AAA to prove something else or get more at bats. I think he's ready.
I think so as well. And, I agree with you. If he can platoon where, he can play 4 or 5 days in a row, but he's given guys a day off. So whether it be Perdomo a day off from shortstop, Ketel Marte a day off from second, he can play a little bit of third base. He can DH, if you still want him out there. And to bring that speed / power that, he has, and he's been doing good. I feel like he should get rewarded. And I think he can be a big spark plug for this team. Now, my question is, can it be tough to, move around as someone that's, kind of, early in their career to be able to play different positions? Or is it something that, like you look at him, he's doing really well. Is it just a natural thing?
It's super valuable for the organization, but I will say it's not super valuable for the individual. And I'll explain that here in a second. So super valuable towards the organization because he could play multiple positions. He's like 5 players in one, right? You can really move him around. Not super great for the individual because from a career move, you want to be a guy that has a primary and a secondary position because you want to try to be the best shortstop, right, in the North League West. You want to be the best first baseman in the ALS. Like, you want to create a name for yourself at a position, not only at bat, but on the field as well, so you can really have those big contracts, right? So it's a give and a take. Usually guys early on will be more open and flexible of playing multiple positions, but I would expect Blaze to get advice from his agent that, hey, as we get down the road here with your career, we really have to solidify what position you want to focus on, or maybe 2 positions, so that way you can really take care of yourself in the later years of your career.
That is true, and that's really, really, smart advice right there. And hey, we'll see what manager Tolo does, because this is a really tough decision to make. Well, that is episode 8 of the podcast. Again, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you listen to the podcast on. I am Roshocker with Trevor McKenna, and we are out of here.
Thank you for listening to Diamond in the Desert podcast.